All right, everybody. It is the Coach's Compass. We are back, and it is season 2, right? Already jumping into season 2, bringing on cool guests from all across the world. Now, remember, hit that like, subscribe, comment button down below so we can continue to have this thing grow and continue to bring on cool guests from all across the world. It's your boy, Coach Coop, reporting live from the US of A. Coach J can't be with us tonight because it's like 1 a.m. his time, so I told my boy just go ahead and get him some sleep. But we got another cool guest with us tonight. We got Coach Matt. He is at the University of Arizona, where he is the assistant strength and conditioning coach for football. Coach Matt, thank you for being here with us tonight, man.
No, I appreciate you having
So
me
we're
on,
going to
man.
talk about the ever-changing world of college athletics and especially college football, right? We got everything going on in college football. We got NIL deals. We got transfer portal. We got it up and down with everything. What are you seeing over your years of being in college football that you have seen change from the athlete standpoint and the coaching perspective on how you deal with it in strength and conditioning?
Yeah, I think the profession has grown as a whole. I mean, when I first started getting into the business for about 11 years ago, there were a lot of Power Five programs who had five strength coaches for football, but a lot of them maybe had two, three, four. Now if you look across, the Power Four, Power Five programs, everybody's got five strength coaches for football. Everyone's got, a full-time nutritionist. When I first got in the business, people were starting to hire nutritionists. They hire a paid intern, then they hire full time. Now nutrition is its own department, right? Sports psychology is its own department. Sports science is becoming its own department. So I think across athletic departments in this country, they're building high performance teams, which is where it should go, right? They're expanding on their sports medicine department, expanding on the sports science department. The biggest difference in what we do, I think in the past, 10, 15 years, there's been a tech boom, right? Just across the world, but, it's been integrated in sports for sure. When I first, again, getting into the business, um, some people had Catapult GPS, but most didn't. I didn't really know anyone who was working with force plates. VBT was starting to get popular. People started getting tendos. The Nord board wasn't around. Actually, when I was interning for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Milo got the first Nord board in the United States. I didn't even know what it was. It was in a box. I was like, "What is this thing?" And that's become kind of the norm now, right? Everyone has a Nord board. Everyone has force plates. Everyone has catapult. So there's been a tech boom. I think people are integrating data science a lot more, and I think you're just seeing a more integrated approach as a whole, right? Like everyone used to operate in silos. Strength coaches are over here, nutrition's over here, sports meds over here, sports psychs over here, football's over there, and now it's more of a well-oiled machine. Everything's more integrated, and I think that high performance model that kind of came over from
Mm-hmm.
Europe and Australia is more
What year were
prevalent.
you with the Jags? You were there
2014.
right before me. I was with the Jags in 2015. So small world. Yeah,
I had no
small world
idea.
how it all
Wow,
comes
that's
together.
funny.
But you talk about that technology boom. How have you guys at the University of Arizona used technology to your advantage? But how have you also seen technology kind of hinder coaches in the strength conditioning world?
Yeah, I think it could be a gift and a curse, right? Like we're really fortunate. We have a bunch of tech at our disposal. So, we have 90 catapult units. We have two force plates. We have two Nord boards. We have two 1080s. We have Elite Form VBT. We have Kenga Tech. So we're really lucky. But, here's the reality. Like the tech is great and the data is great. But if you don't know what you're doing with it,
Right.
it's worthless. Right. So I think there's a lot of people who use tech and we do this and we do that, but is it actually eliciting change? Right. And just like on the GPS side, I think a lot of times, like our football coaches, not all of them, but a lot of football coaches look at catapult like, well, you're just going to tell me to do less. Right. But oftentimes it's actually the opposite, right? Like sometimes we'll see on Saturday guys are hitting X amount of high speed yards, and I'm like, hey, we actually need to do more speed work throughout the week. We're not getting as many high speed yards as we need for Saturday. Or, hey, actually we're in a great spot. We can push the envelope tomorrow a little more. So I try to do that as often as I can so that if we ever do have to ask them to pull it back a little bit, they're not looking at me crazy. But I think that's a misconception with a lot of the tech is we're just gonna use it to pull guys back. But I mean, the reality is we're all after the same thing, right? Like I think about like as a sports performance coach, as a strength coach, you really have two goals. One is increase player availability, keep guys healthy, right? Reduce injury rates. You're never gonna completely eliminate injury, especially
Mhm.
contact injury, right? If a guy takes a helmet to a knee, there's not a whole lot you can do. But we really want to reduce the rate of those soft tissue injuries, especially non contact. And then we want to enhance performance, right? Stronger, faster, you know, increase power output, increase work capacity, and, better lifestyle. So um, that's what
Of
we're
course.
all after, right? Like, so any tech we use, that's what we're trying to drive player health and
Right.
enhance
With
performance.
the, because it might be new to some of, the listeners out there. What are you guys, when you use your VBTs or even your Nord boards or your force plates, what are some of the most important metrics that you're kind of tracking in those? So if you could take us to a day that you actually use the VBT, what are you tracking? What are you looking for? How is it used and so beneficial?
Yeah, I think when you look at any piece of sports science tech, we use it in one of three ways, right? Like number one, from a player profiling standpoint, right? Like we want to be able to say, hey, this is the fastest kid on the team. This kid has the highest peak power out of all the wide receivers. Okay, this guy's the best accelerator at linebacker that we have, right? So we can see their strengths and weaknesses, and then we can best target their plan to raise those weaknesses and keep their strengths. And then just from an evaluation standpoint, like we give that data to coaches, and that's good feedback for them to understand, where guys are at. Number two, from a readiness monitoring standpoint, right? Just monitoring neuromuscular fatigue, making sure we're taking care of guys, especially in season, right? We're looking for, is there a drop off? Are we making sure we're setting our guys up for success on game day, right? And keeping them strong and powerful throughout the season. And then third would be from a return to play standpoint, right? We want to get objective data so that if a guy does get hurt, we can look back on that and track progress, right? Like if we're working a guy back from a hamstring injury, we want to see him sprint 90% before we feel good about giving him the green light to go back into practice, right? If we have a kid coming off a knee injury, we can get him on the force plate at a certain point and track asymmetries and make sure that we're trending in the right direction. So having that objective data helps a ton.
So, I mean, you said it yourself. You were starting in the industry before this technology came in, and you see the big boom. Do you believe technology is actually helping this to go in the right direction from a strength conditioning, sports performance side, or do you feel it's doing more harm? Because it's the new school versus old school mindset. A lot of old school coaches are kind of like, hey, I've got the coach's eye. I know what works and what doesn't work. Or
Yeah,
you got the newer guys that are in the game. They're like, hey, like you
yeah.
said, we know how to use the technology and what we're using it for. So there's that hard. I think we're almost there to where the old and the new skill are balancing. Right, they're getting together, but we're still, you still got some facilities that don't even have the stuff. Right?
For sure. For sure. And like, listen, people got really good results and won a lot of football games and ran really fast and got really
Yeah.
strong without tech. Like, do you need it? No, you don't need it. But I believe it is beneficial to have because if not, you're
Right.
really just guessing. It gives you objective data and it eliminates that guessing game. But to me, like, all right, let me ask you this: like, what type of cell
The
phone
iPhone
you have?
15.
Right, like you don't have a
Nah.
flip phone anymore. Like we're evolving and changing, right? Like we used to ride around horse and buggy, right? But like I have a Jeep now. Like it
Yeah, I
goes a
get
little
point A to point
faster.
B better than
You
I
know what I'm
can.
saying? So right, like listen, everyone playing, and I try to make this analogy with football coaches. Like everyone used to run the veer, right? And then everyone ran I form and just pound the ball down everyone's throats. And then people started getting in shotgun, and they say, you know what? We can score more points this way, right? So like the game is not played how it used to be played. So our industry is no different than any other industry. You have to evolve and grow. If not, you're going to get left behind. So I think we're always looking for ways to improve. And we're not going to do new things just to do new things. But if it's beneficial to the student athletes and it can help us win games and run faster and jump higher, and that's what we're after, So I think you have to evolve. You can't be rigid in your beliefs and your mindset. You have to have an open mind, because if not, you're really doing your athletes a disservice.
Now, with all the technology pieces, I mean, there's so many different ones. You got the 1080s, you got the VBT, you got the catapults, GPSs, you got valve, timing systems, all these different types of things. If you had to take, 3 pieces of equipment and you're going to start your own program, right? Or you're starting your own gym or whatever it may be. What would be your top 3 that you would tell them, hey, this is super important. I need to have this day one.
Yeah. Well, in the team setting, where I'm working right now, I think GPS becomes really important just because it gives us an objective number on what practice looks like, gives us an objective number on what a game looks like, so that we can work backwards from there, right? Like I could give you objective data on what a game is going to look like for a wide receiver on Saturdays. Now, there's always going to be variation, right? If you go into overtime, if you score 60 points, his player load is going to be a little lower, higher than if you score 5 points, right? So it's always different. But for the most part, we have pretty good norms and we know what a game looks like for different position groups. So then we can make sure that we want practices to set them up for success on Saturday. And then we can work backwards from that. We want to make sure our off season sets them up for success in training camp and in practice. So I think GPS gives you a lot of bang for your buck. But yeah, like we said earlier, you don't
Right.
need any tech. I love BBT, right? Like we use Elite Form. I've used Tendos. I've used Perch. It increases intent. It drives competition, and it makes sure you're training in the right zone and the right volume and intensity that you want. So I love the 1080 sprint, right? Like we're really fortunate to have a couple. But again, you don't need any of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I feel that. But a lot of guys nowadays they want it all, right? Because it looks good, it helps sell, bring in more recruits. Even in the private sector, it
Right.
helps bring in different athletes to come train at your facility and whatnot. But with that,
Sure.
what is Coach Matt doing that's helping? I guess you wouldn't say change the strength and conditioning field and make it a better place, but how are you making it better for the athletes and piecing things together to make them even better athletes when you get them in?
Man, I don't know that I'm that
You're pretty.
important, but
You're a
I
P5,
think
bro. You're pretty important.
no. Listen, I barely know what I'm doing, but I think on the day to day, and even looking at the big picture, we're trying to figure out what matters. I hear Stuart McMillan talk about figure out what matters and then measure what matters. So a big part of our job is like figuring out what doesn't really help guys. Like what are we doing? What are we wasting our time with? Get rid of that, okay? And then what can we do to really drive performance and increase player health? Answering those questions is it's a constant battle, right? Like what can we take out? What do we need to add? But what problems are we having? Right? Like what common injuries are we seeing? If you look at American football, like, there's a
Yeah.
hamstring epidemic. I mean, it just is, right? Like, and we haven't figured it out, right? So there's a lot of questions that I don't have the answers to, and that kind of
Mhm.
keeps me going, right? Like, I don't, we haven't figured out the best way to prepare a football team yet, right? Like, we know, right? We know if we follow certain guidelines, like getting guys stronger is
Right.
relatively easy, right? It's not that hard. Getting guys faster, we have pretty good guidelines, but that's a little more complex, a little more going on, a little harder to do. Keeping guys healthy, like I'm just telling you, I see pro teams and college teams who I know there are really, really, really smart people working there, some of the brightest minds in the world, and they got guys dropping
Right.
every game. So like we haven't figured it out, So I think that's kind of what gets me out of bed every morning is trying to figure out the best way to do this so that we can keep guys on the field, keep improving those metrics that matter and win
Yeah. I
games.
mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, I'm sitting here in your shoes on the private sector side of things. Thinking about what you said with like what is waste? Like what can we get rid of? What like how do you guys figure that out on a day-to-day basis? Like, hey, like we don't need this in here today. Like we're gonna just stick with this. Like what are you guys using to kind of measure that and decide like, hey, this is what's the main thing. The main thing is the main thing. This is what we need to focus on. And all this other stuff is
Yeah.
just fluff. And how do you like explain that to the players and the coaches that like we're getting rid of this stuff like just so we can do this?
So I think you always got to just work backwards from the sport, right? So like, what is the sport of football, right? So if you look at the bioenergetic demands, we know what energy system football is played at. It's a highly alactic sport, but we know if we train the aerobic system, that'll help our guys recover in between bouts. Okay, so that's objective. Like that's tough to argue, right? We know what energy system we need to train with. And okay, so then you look at the biomotor capabilities of a football player. Okay, what do they need? All right, we need strength, we need power, we need speed, we need to be able to change direction, accelerate, decelerate, all those qualities we need to train. And then you look at the biodynamics, the direction of force, the common joint angles, common movements, and then you work backwards from all three of those things, right? So I think what we've done better as a field is starting to weed out like what's really important for certain position groups versus what's really important for other position groups. Like the closer you get to the ball in football, the more important maximal strength is, right? The further away you get from the ball, the more important max velocity is, right? So we need to train accordingly. Like if you look at the fastest guys on the football field, they're
Mm,
not that strong, if we're being honest. Like the best receivers I've ever been around, they're strong, but they're not that strong.
right.
They're really fast though. They change direction very well. They can stop on a dime. They're really good accelerators. So that seems to be pretty important. So you start looking at certain KPIs for each position and then working backwards from there. It's like, okay, we know what qualities are important for a receiver versus what qualities are important for an offensive lineman. Like, I'm going to put a lot more stock in the maximal strength world for an O lineman. Like, that guy needs to produce power over and over and over again, right? He plays in a 5x5 box. We don't need to run crazy volumes with him, right? Now, a DB,
Oh
that's a
yes.
different story. That guy's going to cover a lot of ground, right? He's in a multi-directional track meet every Saturday. So we got to prepare them for that. Your combo guys, your big skill, they're a little bit of both, right? QB, kind of a specialized position, rotational athlete, like a little different. Kickers, a little different. So I think when you start looking at the qualities for each position group and establishing those key performance indicators, then you start having a more clear, a clearer understanding of what's important for each guy and what we need to focus on. Then you start looking at individual to individual, right? Because I got a running back who runs 23 miles an hour. I got another running back who runs 19.8 on a good day. Those guys probably got to
Yeah.
focus on some different things, right? Like they're just in different spots. I got some we got O lineman who squats 650 pounds. I got other O linemen who can't squat 350, right? So those guys play the same position group, but we need to work on different qualities for them. Some guys need more absolute strength work, especially like your
Hmm.
younger athletes, right? They can benefit from getting stronger. But there's a ceiling on when absolute strength carries over to the field, right? Like, and I think that ceiling's a lot lower than we want to admit. Because as strength coaches, like we're
Yeah.
meatheads, we want to lift weights, right? But is me getting this guy's back squat from 550 to 560 really going to help him become a better football player?
Right.
I don't know. Like we may need to work on some more, power speed qualities, right? So even within position groups, there's guys that are going to need to focus on different things. So I think the more we can individualize, the better. And I always think about like when I was an athlete, what would have benefited me? And if it was like my son, what would I want him to be doing, right? And I think having a more individualized approach benefits
So
the
how
athlete.
hard was it for you to get out of that mindset of the strength and conditioning coach that wants to be a meathead, right? Taking a guy from 550 to 560 and realizing that that 10-pound jump really like it's not going to affect really their performance that much. Like it's not going to do them much better. Like how hard was it to change your mindset and flip it into, hey, like, okay, he can do 550, but what other areas is he struggling at, and how can I help him become a better?
Yeah, again, I think when you look at the game, you know, what is what is the game of football? It's played at high speeds and high velocities. It's not a slow game, right? So slow, heavy lifting, there's a time and a place for that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-strength by any means, but you just start looking at, okay, well, what are they really going to benefit from? And I think when you're younger in your career, like you
Right.
don't know any better, right? Like you're just doing whatever your mentors did and whatever you did as an athlete, right? Like, yeah, we lift weight. That's what we do, back squat. Well, it's like, all right, well, what if there's a better
Mm-hmm.
way to do things? And I think that goes back to just continuing to evolve and continuing to grow as a coach and ask a lot of questions. And I think the more objective you can get, because like you can't argue with numbers, right? Like guys are running 20 miles an hour on the field. Like we have guys who run 10 meters per second, but we do a back squat at zero point 0.8 meters per second, maybe 1 meter per second, and we think we're doing speed work. Like, what are you talking about? Like they're gonna run 9 times that speed on the field. You know, I think just looking at the game as objectively as possible and really understanding what guys do at their position, you start having a little more of a vivid picture of like what we really need to work
So
on.
on top of that, coach, like you've had 11 years plus in this industry. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Man, that's a loaded question. Um, I don't know, man. Hopefully in a bigger office making more money, but I just want to win some games and help guys. I enjoy what I do and hopefully I'm still helping athletes in some capacity. I got some goals and aspirations like everybody does, but I just want to continue. If I just want to keep doing this. If we could just keep moving up slowly but surely, that's kind of the goal. I used to have 5-year goals, 10-year goals, 7-year goals, three, and I still have some of those. But I think the longer I do this, the more you just, and again, it's kind of a corny generic answer, but the truth is, if you just keep getting better and continue to make small steps and continue to climb, like those big picture goals tend to take care of themselves. So I'm just
it's
trying to
it's
get
the same
better.
thing we preach to our athletes, right? Trust the process. It's small steps. One, but
Right.
we like to say it as coaches, but we don't want to listen to it, right? We're like, no, 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 we're going.
No
Yeah,
doubt, because it's hard, right? Yeah, like it's hard to have a growth mindset and just be patient. Like being patient's hard. I'm not a very patient
right there
person,
with you.
so it can be difficult,
Yeah, I feel
at
that.
times.
But last thing before we get out of here, what's one question you would love to hear us ask our next guest?
One question you should ask your next guest. I'm always interested in what, who people are learning from right now. Like what, where is your continued education targeted at? Like what are you diving into right now? Like who do I need to look
Right.
up and learn from more? Right? Like, what book do I need to read? Right? Like, who do I need to call? So I think I'm always really interested in that. Like, where are people learning? Where are people pulling from? Like, what do I need to do? Because I'm just trying to
Right.
cheat off the right people and get
Like
the
they
right
said, if you
answers.
ain't
You know what
cheating,
I'm
you ain't
saying?
trying.
So, yeah, I'm always interested in that. Like, what are you working on right now? Like, what's exciting coaches and where are they learning from and what avenues are they
That's
pulling
what's
from?
up. We definitely gonna put that in for the next one. But Coach Matt, I know you got a busy schedule, just like the rest of the strength and conditioning coaches out there. So we appreciate you jumping on with us tonight and dropping a bunch of knowledge. Right, like I learned a lot from you today, just from this technology standpoint, and also what you're dealing with on the college side. Right, again, I'm on the private sector. I've been out of college football for about 10 years, but I'm seeing everything you're doing and loving it. It's a complete change from what I was doing back when I was in. All I was doing was just, like you said, lifting heavy, and then you just go out and run your 110s, and there was no technology behind it. What you guys are doing now, I'm loving it because it's changing the game not only for the college side, but on our side for the private sector too, and they're making us get better. So thank you. We appreciate you, man, and we can't wait to drop this episode. For
Appreciate you,
sure.
man. Thanks.